The smell of charcoal and grilled meat filled the warm summer air as our neighborhood's annual barbecue kicked into full swing. Paper lanterns swayed gently in the breeze, casting a warm glow over the backyard as laughter and conversation mingled with the crackling of the fire. I stood near the grill, flipping burgers while my wife chatted with some of the neighborhood ladies near the beverage table. Everything seemed perfect, a typical Saturday afternoon in suburbia where everyone pretended their lives were just as pristine as their manicured lawns. I should have known better. My neighbor, the one who lived 3 doors down in the house with the perpetually overgrown hedges, had been drinking since the moment he arrived. I'd watched him progress from cheerful to loud, from loud to obnoxious. He was the type who thought volume equaled personality, and alcohol only amplified that delusion. His wife had left an hour earlier, embarrassed by his behavior, muttering something about a headache. Now he stood in the center of the yard, red-faced and swaying, holding court with a cluster of uncomfortable-looking neighbors. "You know what?" His voice boomed across the yard, cutting through every other conversation like a knife. "I've got an announcement to make." The chatter died down. People turned, some curious, others already cringing at what might come next. My wife looked over at me from across the yard, her eyes questioning. I shrugged, spatula still in hand, though something in my gut twisted uncomfortably. He raised his beer bottle high, sloshing some of its contents onto the grass. "I'm gonna be a father." He laughed, a harsh, braying sound that made several people step back. "Well, sort of. See, I got someone pregnant. Someone right here in this neighborhood." The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop on the grass. My wife's face had gone pale, her hand instinctively moving to her slightly rounded belly. She was 4 months along, and we'd just started telling people. "That's right." He pointed an unsteady finger directly at my wife. "Her. I got her pregnant. How about that?" Time seemed to slow down. I watched my wife's face crumble, tears immediately springing to her eyes. Our neighbors' expressions ranged from shock to disgust to morbid curiosity. Some people gasped. Others immediately pulled out their phones, probably already composing texts to spread this juicy piece of gossip. Mrs. Patterson from next door actually had her mouth hanging open, her plate of potato salad tilting dangerously in her hand. But I didn't react the way everyone expected. I didn't lunge at him. I didn't shout or throw punches. Instead, I very carefully set down my spatula, wiped my hands on a towel, and walked calmly toward the house. My wife was now sobbing, surrounded by a few sympathetic neighbors trying to comfort her while shooting poisonous glares at the drunk fool still laughing in the center of the yard. "Where you going?" he called after me, his voice mocking. "Can't handle the truth? Real man's taking care of your responsibilities." I ignored him, climbing the steps to our deck and entering through the sliding glass door. My hands were steady, steadier than they'd been in weeks, actually. Because unlike everyone at that barbecue, I knew something they didn't. I'd been waiting for this moment, or one like it, for almost a month now. I'd been prepared, had all my evidence gathered, all my facts straight. I just hoped I wouldn't have to use it in such a public way. But he'd made his choice. He'd decided to humiliate my wife in front of our entire neighborhood, to spread his poison for everyone to consume. So now I was going to do something I'd learned from years of working in corporate litigation. I was going to present the facts, let the evidence speak for itself, and watch everything crumble for those who deserved it. I grabbed my tablet from the kitchen counter, pulled up the file I'd been dreading to play, and walked back outside. The conversation had erupted now, voices overlapping as people argued and speculated. My wife was being escorted toward our house by 2 kind neighbors, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "Everyone!" I called out, my voice cutting through the chaos. "I have something you all need to hear." 3 weeks earlier, I'd been living in blissful ignorance. My wife and I had just found out we were expecting our first child. The pregnancy had been a surprise. We'd been trying for a year with no success, had even started looking into fertility treatments. Then, suddenly, she was pregnant. We'd been overjoyed, already picking out names, already imagining what our little one would look like. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was from my wife's best friend, Sarah, and her voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "We need to talk," she'd said. "In person." Without your wife. We met at a coffee shop downtown, far from our neighborhood. Sarah looked like she hadn't slept in days, dark circles under her eyes, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She slid her phone across the table to me without preamble. I overheard this conversation at the office, she said quietly. I shouldn't have recorded it, but I thought you should know. I pressed play, and my entire world tilted on its axis. It was a conversation between my wife and her coworker, the one she'd mentioned occasionally but whom I'd never met, the one who worked on the same project team, who sometimes gave her rides home when her car was in the shop. The one whose name had been coming up more and more frequently in her stories about work. Their voices were hushed, intimate, speaking in that particular tone people use when they're sharing secrets. My wife's voice came first. I don't know what to do. He's going to figure it out eventually. It's been 4 months, the male voice responded, smooth, confident, utterly lacking in remorse. If you haven't told him yet, why start now? Just let him think it's his. He'll never know the difference. But what about us? My wife asked, and I could hear something in her voice. Hope? Longing? It made my stomach turn. There is no us, he replied flatly. I told you from the beginning this was just physical. I'm not leaving my girlfriend for you. Just keep your mouth shut, play the happy wife, and everyone wins. He gets to be a father, you get financial security, and I get to walk away clean. The conversation continued, but I'd stopped listening. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her eyes full of sympathy. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of my life. I went home every day and pretended everything was normal. I kissed my wife good morning, asked about her day, rubbed her feet when they got swollen. I attended the prenatal appointments, held her hand during the ultrasound, smiled at the blurry image on the screen that showed a child I now knew wasn't mine. But in the evenings, after she went to bed early, pregnancy made her tired, she said. I investigated. I went through her phone records, her emails, her text messages. I hired a private investigator, a discreet woman with 20 years of experience who promised to get me answers without being detected. I documented everything, saved everything, backed up everything in multiple locations. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. The affair had been going on for 8 months. It had started at an office party, fueled by too much wine and too little judgment. Then it had continued, lunch breaks that ran long, late meetings that never appeared on her work calendar, business trips that required sharing hotel rooms to save on expenses. The private investigator got me photos, video surveillance from hotel lobbies, credit card receipts from romantic restaurants. But the worst part was the text messages I found buried in a hidden folder on her phone, messages detailing not just the physical affair, but an emotional one too. Messages where she talked about her doubts about our marriage, her feelings of being trapped, her desire for excitement and passion. And then, the most damning discovery of all, I found evidence that our drunk neighbor had somehow gotten wind of the affair. There were text messages between him and someone else, gossiping about my wife, speculating about the pregnancy, making crude jokes. He'd apparently seen her coworker drop her off late one night and had pieced together enough to start spreading rumors, though in his drunk, ego-fueled mind, he decided to claim the child was his, apparently thinking it would make him look like some kind of stud. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been destroying my life. I consulted with a lawyer, got my options laid out clearly. I filed for divorce quietly, the papers ready to be served at the appropriate time. I transferred our joint savings into my own account, legally, since I was the only one who'd been contributing to it anyway. I documented her affair meticulously, knowing that in our state, infidelity mattered in divorce proceedings. And then I'd waited, wondering when and how the truth would come out. I never expected it to be at a neighborhood barbecue, with a drunk fool making false claims in front of everyone we knew. But in a way, it was perfect. Everyone would hear the truth at once. No rumors, no gossip, no whisper campaigns. Just cold, hard facts. I stood on the deck, tablet in hand, looking out at the sea of faces turned toward me. My wife had stopped at the edge of the yard, held up by her concerned neighbors, her tear-stained face now showing confusion mixed with fear. She knew that expression on my face, the one I wore when I was about to present evidence in a deposition, calm and controlled and utterly merciless. I appreciate everyone's concern, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent yard. But before we all start making judgments based on drunken accusations, I think we should establish some facts. The drunk neighbor laughed, though it sounded less confident now. What facts? I just told you the truth, man. That baby's mine. Is it? I tapped the screen of my tablet, pulling up the first file. That's interesting, because according to this recording, you've never even touched my wife. In fact, according to this conversation you had with your co-worker at the hardware store 2 weeks ago, you made the whole thing up. I hit play. His voice crackled through the tablet speakers, loud and clear despite the background noise of the hardware store. I'm telling you, I'm spreading it around that I knocked up the hot wife down the street. Why? Because it makes me look good, man. Makes everyone think I've still got it. My wife hasn't touched me in months, so at least people will think someone wants me. The other voice, someone I didn't recognize, had responded, "That's messed up, dude. What if her husband finds out you're lying? What's he gonna do? Guy's a pencil pusher. Besides, everyone loves drama. They'll believe it whether it's true or not." The backyard had gone from silent to absolutely frozen. You could have heard a heartbeat. The drunk neighbor's face had gone from red to ashen, all the alcohol-fueled bravado draining away like water from a broken dam. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "So that settles that," I continued, my voice still eerily calm. "You're a liar who invented a story to stroke your own ego, and in the process, you humiliated my wife in front of our entire neighborhood. We'll be dealing with that legally, by the way. I hope your homeowner's insurance covers defamation lawsuits." Mrs. Patterson had recovered her voice. "Well, if he's lying, then the baby is yours, right? This is all just a misunderstanding." I felt something twist in my chest, the first crack in my carefully maintained composure. "I wish that were true, Mrs. Patterson. I really do. But no, the baby isn't mine." My wife made a sound, half sob, half gasp. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with 7 years ago. The woman who'd laughed at my terrible jokes, who'd held my hand during my father's funeral, who'd promised to love me in good times and bad. Then I blinked, and all I saw was the stranger who'd been lying to me for 8 months, who'd been planning to let me raise another man's child while she continued her affair. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "But everyone's going to find out eventually. Better it's the truth than whatever story he was spreading." I pulled up the second recording, the one Sarah had made at the office. "This is a conversation between my wife and her co-worker. I apologize in advance for what you're about to hear. Some of you have children present, so you might want to cover their ears." I hit play. My wife's voice filled the yard. "I don't know what to do. He's going to figure it out eventually. It's been 4 months. If you haven't told him yet, why start now? Just let him think it's his. He'll never know the difference." "But what about us?" "There is no us. I told you from the beginning this was just physical. I'm not leaving my girlfriend for you. Just keep your mouth shut, play the happy wife, and everyone wins." The recording continued for another minute, with more damning details, mentions of hotel rooms, discussions of when they could next meet up, my wife asking if he'd ever leave his girlfriend and him laughing at the suggestion. When it finally ended, the silence was absolute. Then, like a wave breaking, everyone started talking at once. Some people were staring at my wife with open disgust. Others looked sympathetic, shooting me pitying glances. A few were already backing away, wanting to escape the drama but not wanting to miss anything either. My wife had collapsed onto the grass, sobbing uncontrollably. Her concerned neighbors had backed away, no longer sure if comfort was appropriate. The drunk neighbor was trying to slink away toward his house, but several people had positioned themselves to block his path, their faces hard. But I wasn't done yet. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling up a third file. "The co-worker's name is David Thornton. Some of you might know him. He's lived in the neighborhood over on Maple Street for the past 2 years. He's here tonight, actually." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as heads swiveled, searching faces. I watched as people's expressions changed from confusion to recognition to disgust as they identified the man I'd named. He was standing near the back of the yard, partially hidden behind a group of younger couples, holding a beer and looking like he desperately wished the ground would swallow him whole. David Thornton was exactly the kind of man who could charm his way into an affair. Tall, athletic build, the kind of carefully casual appearance that took effort to maintain but looked effortless. He'd moved into the neighborhood 2 years ago with his girlfriend, and they'd become fixtures at these social events. He'd always been friendly, quick with a joke, the type who remembered everyone's names and asked about their kids. I'd probably talked to him a dozen times at various gatherings, never suspecting he was sleeping with my wife. "David," I called out, my voice cutting through the murmurs. "Would you like to add anything? Maybe explain to your girlfriend why you're about to become a father." His girlfriend, a petite woman with short dark hair who worked as a nurse, turned to him slowly, her face draining of color. "What is he talking about?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, but in the silence, everyone heard it. David's face had gone red, then white, then red again. He set down his beer with a shaking hand. You can't just, that recording was private." "So was my marriage," I shot back, my calm finally cracking, letting some of the rage I'd been holding back seep through. "So were the vows my wife made to me. So were the 8 months you spent screwing her behind my back, planning to let me raise your child while you walked away clean. But here we are." "I didn't know she'd get pregnant," he stammered, taking a step back as his girlfriend advanced on him, her fists clenched. "It was just supposed to be fun, nothing serious." "Nothing serious?" My wife shrieked from where she sat on the ground, finding her voice at last. "You told me you loved me. You said your girlfriend didn't understand you, that you were planning to leave her." "Oh my God," David's girlfriend breathed, and the betrayal on her face was mirror to what I'd felt when Sarah first played me that recording. How long has this been going on?" 8 months, I answered for them, still consulting my tablet. The affair started at an office Christmas party. Hotel meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays, usually. A weekend trip to the coast in March that they both lied to their respective partners about. "Would you like me to continue? I have receipts. Credit card statements. Text messages. My private investigator was very thorough." David's girlfriend let out a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. She turned to look at me, and we shared a moment of perfect understanding. Two people whose lives had been shattered by the selfishness of others, standing in the wreckage trying to figure out how to move forward. "I'm sorry," she said to me, her voice breaking. "I had no idea. If I'd known." "It's not your fault," I told her gently. "Neither of us did anything wrong here." She nodded, tears streaming down her face, then turned back to David. Her voice, when she spoke, was cold as ice. "We're done. I want you out of my house tonight. I don't care where you go, but you're not staying there." "Baby, please," David reached for her, but she jerked away from his touch like it burned. "Don't you dare call me that. Don't you dare touch me." She grabbed her purse from where she'd set it on a nearby table. "I'll have your things packed and on the lawn by tomorrow morning. If you come near me or contact me in any way, I'm filing a restraining order." She walked past him, past all of us, her head held high despite the tears. I felt a flash of admiration for her composure, her immediate decisiveness. She'd found out about the betrayal mere minutes ago, yet she already knew exactly what she needed to do. I wished I'd been that certain when I first learned the truth. The drunk neighbor, seeing an opportunity to escape while attention was focused elsewhere, tried to slip away. But Mr. Henderson, the retired Marine who lived on the corner, blocked his path with an arm like an iron bar. "Where do you think you're going?" Mr. Henderson growled. "You started this mess with your lies. Least you can do is stick around for the cleanup." "I didn't mean," the neighbor started, but Mr. Henderson cut him off. "You didn't mean to destroy a man's reputation? Didn't mean to humiliate a woman in front of her neighbors, regardless of what else she'd done? Didn't mean to spread vicious lies for your own amusement?" He shook his head in disgust. "You're pathetic. And you're going to stand right here and watch the consequences of your actions." My wife had struggled to her feet, her face blotchy and swollen from crying. She took a few steps toward me, one hand protectively over her stomach. "Please," she said, her voice hoarse. "Can we talk about this inside? Just the two of us." "There's nothing to talk about," I replied, though even saying the words hurt. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the lies, some part of me still wanted to believe there was a way to fix this. That was the hardest part, accepting that the marriage I'd thought I had never really existed at all. "The baby," she started, "isn't mine," I finished. "We both know that now. Everyone knows that now. The DNA test I had done last week confirmed it. You're 16 weeks pregnant, which means conception occurred around mid-July. We were barely intimate that month because you kept saying you were too tired, too stressed from work. Now I know why." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "You had a DNA test done? How?" "Prenatal paternity testing," I explained, my voice flat and clinical. "Non-invasive. Just needed a blood sample from you, which I got from the lab work at your last OB appointment, and a DNA sample from me. Results came back 99.9% certain that I'm not the father." I paused, then delivered the final blow. "I also got a sample from David. 99.9% certain that he is." David made a choking sound, his face going pale. How did you?" "Your girlfriend's house," I said simply. "You left a coffee cup on the counter when you were there for dinner last month. She saved it for me when I explained the situation. She had her suspicions, apparently, but needed proof. Well, now we all have proof." The backyard had descended into chaos. Small clusters of neighbors huddled together, whispering furiously. Some were filming on their phones. I'd expected that. By tomorrow, this whole scene would be all over social media, neighborhood forums, probably even the local news. The gossip chain in our community was vicious, and we'd just fed it enough material for months. Mrs. Patterson approached me cautiously, her husband trailing behind her. "I just want you to know," she said quietly, "that we're here for you. Whatever you need. And those two," she jerked her head toward my wife and David, "they're not welcome at any neighborhood events going forward. I'll make sure everyone knows." "That's not necessary," I started, but she cut me off. "Yes, it is. We have standards here. We take care of our own. They violated the trust of this community, and there are consequences for that." Her face softened slightly. "I know this is horrible for you. But you did the right thing, showing everyone the truth. Better than letting lies and rumors spread." I nodded, not trusting my voice. The truth was, I felt hollow. Empty. I'd imagined this moment dozens of times over the past few weeks, played out different scenarios in my head. In some versions, I was triumphant, vindicated. In others, there was screaming, physical confrontation, dramatic exits. But the reality was just sad. Sad and exhausting and infinitely depressing. My wife was still standing there, one hand on her stomach, tears streaming silently down her face. She looked lost, broken, like she couldn't quite believe this was really happening. Part of me, a small, stupid part, wanted to comfort her. 7 years of marriage didn't just evaporate, even when you knew it had been built on lies for the last 8 months. "I'm sorry," she whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I never meant to hurt you." "But you did," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. "You made choices, every single day for 8 months. That hurt me. Every time you lied about where you were. Every time you let me believe that baby was mine. Every time you came home from being with him and kissed me goodnight. Those were all choices." "I know." She was sobbing openly now, her whole body shaking. "I know, and I'm so sorry. If I could take it all back." "But you can't." I looked past her at David, who was standing frozen like a deer in headlights. "Neither of you can. So now we all have to live with the consequences of your choices." "What happens now?" David asked, his voice barely audible. "Now." I pulled out my phone and made a show of looking at the time. Now I call my lawyer and have the divorce papers delivered first thing Monday morning. I've already filed. I've documented everything, the affair, the pregnancy, the deception, all of it. In our state, infidelity matters in divorce proceedings. You won't be getting anything from me beyond what the law absolutely requires, which, given that you committed adultery, isn't much. My wife's knees buckled, and she would have fallen if Sarah hadn't appeared out of nowhere to catch her. Sarah had been standing with a group in the corner, watching everything unfold. Now she helped my wife to a nearby chair, her face a mixture of sympathy and stern disappointment. As for the child, I continued, looking at David, that's between you and her now. My name won't be on the birth certificate. You'll need to establish paternity legally and work out custody arrangements. Child support too. I have a copy of the DNA test ready to submit to the court. I can't afford a kid, David stammered. I'm barely making my rent. Should have thought of that before you started sleeping with a married woman, Mr. Henderson interjected gruffly. Several people murmured agreement. The drunk neighbor, still being held in place by Mr. Henderson's iron grip, finally spoke up. His voice was small, all the earlier bravado gone. I really didn't know about any of this. The affair, I mean. I saw them together once, late at night, and I assumed. Then I started drinking and telling people, making it bigger than it was, making myself the center of the story because... He trailed off, looking ashamed. Because you're a small man who needs to make up stories to feel important, Mr. Henderson finished for him. Well, congratulations. You got your attention. How's it feel? The neighbor didn't answer, just stared at his feet. I looked around at the assembled crowd, our neighbors, our friends, people we'd known for years. Some looked sympathetic, others judgmental, still others simply uncomfortable to have witnessed such an intimate catastrophe. The barbecue was definitely over. People were already starting to drift away, gathering their dishes and children, casting backward glances as they went. I think we're done here, I said, addressing everyone. Thank you all for bearing witness, I suppose. I'm sorry your evening was ruined. Your evening was ruined, Mrs. Patterson corrected firmly. You just made sure the truth came out. That took courage. I wasn't sure about courage. It felt more like survival. Like I'd been drowning and finally broke the surface, gasping for air. The water was still there, still threatening to pull me under, but at least now I could see the shore. As people dispersed, murmuring sympathetically as they passed me, I walked over to where Sarah was sitting with my wife. My wife looked up at me with red, swollen eyes, her face a mask of misery. Where will you go? I asked, my voice neutral. I don't know. My sister's maybe. You have until Sunday evening to pack your essential items and leave. I'm staying at a hotel tonight, but I'll be back tomorrow to change the locks. Anything you don't take by Sunday will be packed up and donated. I paused, then added, the house is in my name only. I bought it before we married. You have no legal claim to it. She nodded numbly, seeming to shrink into herself. I turned to Sarah. Thank you for telling me. I know it wasn't easy. You deserved to know the truth, she said simply. I just wish I'd found out sooner. So do I. I looked back at my wife one last time. 7 years. 7 years of memories, of shared experiences, of building a life together. All of it tainted now by 8 months of lies. Goodbye, I said softly, then walked toward my car. Behind me, I heard my wife break down completely, her sobs echoing across the now empty yard. David had disappeared, probably chased off by angry neighbors or escaping before someone decided to make the confrontation physical. The drunk neighbor was being lectured harshly by Mr. Henderson and several other neighbors about responsibility and consequences. I sat in my car for a long moment, hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed, messages from concerned neighbors, probably, or maybe my lawyer checking in. I ignored it all. Tomorrow, I'd start picking up the pieces, figuring out the logistics of divorce and moving forward. Tomorrow, I'd begin the process of rebuilding my life from scratch. But tonight, I just needed to breathe. To sit in the quiet of my car and process the fact that my marriage was over, that the future I'd imagined, the child I'd been preparing to welcome, the family I'd thought I was building, none of it was real. It had all been an illusion, and I'd just shattered it in front of everyone we knew. Was it the right choice? I didn't know. Maybe handling it privately would have been better, less dramatic, less publicly humiliating for everyone involved. But the drunk neighbor had taken that option away when he decided to make his false accusations in front of everyone. He'd turned my private tragedy into public entertainment. So I'd given them the truth instead. Raw, unfiltered, documented truth. Let them gossip about that. I started the car and pulled away from the curb, watching the neighborhood fade in my rearview mirror. Somewhere in one of these houses, David's girlfriend was probably crying too, dealing with her own betrayal. Somewhere, my wife was facing the reality of raising a child as a single mother with a man who'd made it clear she meant nothing to him. Somewhere, the drunk neighbor was learning that lies have consequences. And me. I was driving toward an uncertain future, but at least it would be an honest one. No more deceptions. No more pretending. Just the truth, however painful it might be. As I turned onto the main road, I allowed myself one moment of emotion. A single tear sliding down my cheek for the man I'd been this morning, the one who still had hope, still had a family, still had a future planned out. Then I wiped it away, set my jaw, and kept driving. The barbecue was over. The truth was out. And tomorrow, the real work of moving forward would begin. But tonight, I'd survived. And somehow, that felt like enough.